everybody, welcome back to Event About It, the Dynamic Dialogue After Show. I'm your host, Megan Martin, and I'm here today with Kati Quigley. And before we get into it, a little context. Kati started her career in associations, came up through events, and went to lead channel, community, product, and customer marketing at Microsoft. Today, she's the VP of Portfolio and Brand Marketing at BMC Software and is known for building impact through connection, not charisma, and is a proud introvert and servant leader. Probably my favorite thing about you. One time, you told me something that quite dramatically changed my career. I'm sure it did many others, but it did for me. You said building your career by widening your skill set, not just climbing a ladder, that the relationships you form will be your leverage. And I took that to heart very, very much and built a lot of my career on it. And to the point now where I talk about how I have a career portfolio. I mean, I do a lot of different things and I work a lot of different jobs. And I think to go back to something you said in the podcast about staying curious. And I have a very curious mind. So like widening my scope has done wonders for me. So I guess thank you for the amazing advice because it has served me so well.
Good. I'm really happy to hear that.
And so how did you decide, we're just going to get right into it,
Great.
Like what move was worth going sideways and not up? So I've also heard the term like climbing a lattice, not a ladder, that sometimes it's a chutes and ladder where you got to move over to move up as opposed to just one singular ladder. So how do you decide what serves you and like making the sidestep actually is the better path forward?
Great. Yes. Yeah. And I've actually made a few of those side steps through my career that were all very different, but at the core, what was similar is that it was an opportunity that was going to help me grow and help me learn more. And like you said, get broader experience as opposed to just the same experience with a different title. And, I went from associations to corporate. I was leading probably about a 20-person, 25-person organization at a association and expanding into education and sponsorship and so forth beyond just events, but then given an opportunity to move to Microsoft. And Microsoft is in my hometown, so it was great, but it was still leading events. So it wasn't a move as far as the responsibility, but it was a move to a completely different environment and a lot more opportunity. And so that was to me a growth opportunity. I did that for quite some time, did end up growing and expanding and moving up in my title. I had an amazing manager that was my manager for almost 10 years, which is unheard of in the corporate world.
Yeah, that is.
I feel very fortunate. He was a finance and operations person who had come from Boeing. And so not an event person, not a marketing person. So I learned very different skills from him. And because of that, I realized I want to do I love events and I don't want to get rid of that, but I want to do other things as well. And so he was going to retire and he said, what do you think? Do you want to be my successor or do you want to do something different? And it was a really hard decision, but I said, I want to do something different because I want to expand what I've been doing for a number of years, and get out of my comfort zone. So there was a job in the partner channel running partner marketing. So it still had some events to it, but it had so much more. And so it was a leap of faith. And I was going from managing a team of 25 people to being by myself. I didn't have a team for the first 3 months. It was building out this discipline. So that's also a hard step to take to say, because everyone works really hard to get to be a manager and say, I'll give it up so I can learn something new. But again, it was because it was so different that I wanted to do it. I still had 30 to 40% of what I had learned in my career, but everything else was new. And, within a few months, I started to build a team, again, was a manager. I actually kind of liked the little bit of a break. I love managing, but I was like, oh, this is kind of nice to kind of use a different part of my brain and spend my time creating versus managing. And I was in that job for like 6 years. I loved it. I didn't want to leave because I just thought this is fantastic. I love the partners. I'm still friends with a lot of those partners. It's really how Microsoft went to market, was through the ecosystem. But I had a really great manager who's now still my mentor. And she said, okay, time for you to move. And so she saw it in me that time. She said, you're a senior marketer that's sitting in a sales organization. You need to move into product marketing. And that was also another hard move because I had not done product marketing. Product
Yeah.
marketing, you're working with engineering, you're working, it's a very different space.
Yeah,
And
channel to product is a big jump. I mean, those are different
yeah,
skills for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And you talked about your network matters. And what mattered then is that that current manager I'd had in the partner channel believed in me. And she had a network, such a strong network that she was able to influence the hiring manager in product marketing to hire a senior marketer who didn't have product marketing experience. And so that was pretty amazing. And I could not have done it if I hadn't earned my manager's trust, and she hadn't earned trust from her peers that were in other parts of the company. So then I did product and industry marketing, and loved it. So, and then I made another bold move and said, okay, I've been at Microsoft for 20 years. I'm now in my comfort zone. It's a challenging place to work, but if you have that network, it feels like, you know how to navigate and it's comfortable. So I'm like, I'm going to leave Microsoft after 20 years, and went to a smaller company, more responsibility. I took on customer marketing, lifecycle marketing. I still had product marketing, and got the opportunity to have I did presentations to the board. I was in the keynotes talking with customers. So things I would not have done at Microsoft. And so that was another bold move. But again, it was, okay, I'm taking the foundation with me that I know how to do marketing. Now I'm going to do it on a smaller company, but then a bigger stage for my responsibilities. And so just every step, I probably was taking like 30% of what I had as experience, but the rest of it was all new things. And, as an introvert, I always think I'm risk adverse. I'm not very bold, but those steps, I will forever be grateful that I was bold and that I did kind of listen to my gut and listen to some great mentors that said, you can do this, and take these steps.
Well, a couple things I heard you say that I think are amazing. One is your network outside of events. Like you were talking about building trust with people outside of your sort of immediate day to day, which I think it serves everyone, regardless of what your career is.
Yes.
And having great mentors. I mean, having a manager for 10 years in any space, but let alone corporate, is pretty special.
Yes, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
And every move you made was when you realized you were in your comfort zone.
Yes.
And once you kind of hit that plateau, you were like, all right, it's time. That was sort of like your trigger to know it's time to challenge myself again and reinvent again, basically.
Yes, it was. Yeah. And it's interesting because, during the pandemic, when I wasn't traveling, I decided to go through a coaching course that was like a year-long coaching course. And that's the whole foundation of coaching, is to get someone out of their comfort zone. And there's a saying that says, out of your comfort zone is where possibility lies. And it's so true, because if you stay where you are, you'll be fine. But if you leave, you're like, wow, there's a whole world out here that I didn't even know about, that I can now learn about, become more accomplished at, meet new people, continue to develop relationships that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah. And thinking now, you've been through so many different, channels of different types of marketing. How did that still impact and influence the way you approached events? Because even in all of these jobs you're still doing, I mean, channel marketing is all event, like it's so event heavy. Like they're smaller field marketing type of programs, but it is a lot of them. So how did all these, giving these new perspectives of the marketing channels, the different types from customer to product lifecycle, all different, how did that change your perspective on how you approached events?
It broadens your view of it, right? What I love is that I still, in every single role, saw events as an important piece of it. Whether I was directly managing it or not, it was still, critical to the success of our marketing tactics. But what you do is you see where events can't be a standalone. You can't focus on what's just that experience for those 3 or 4 days of an event. You think about, how does this fit into the rest of the marketing plan, the company plan, the business objectives that we're trying to achieve? How do we carry these connections that we're building in events out of the event, and then continue that relationship with those customers or those partners. And so you really see how it functions within the entire system, as opposed to just making sure that the event itself is successful.
And did it change how you thought about the success of events? Because so many people just simply rely on leads, and a lot of shows, yes, those are important, but it's also a brand presence. Like I think of some shows where it's bigger if you're not there than if you are there. So you kind of have to go just to, tell the world like we're still here, we're everything's good, don't freak out. But it's not your biggest lead driver. So how did you think about changing the success metrics for the events, now that you've expanded your view of how they impact the business?
Right. I think you just said it. It's like some events, it's because your brand just needs to have that presence. And some events, it's because it truly is your target audience is there that you want to be able to build, drive leads, build expansions with current customers and so forth. So what you have to do before you say, yes, I'm going to do this event, you have to think through it, create a brief, however, you want to structure it, that asks yourself or your team the right questions of like, do we need to be at this event? Why do we need to be at this event? Get other opinions, go to other groups within the organization and say, we're thinking of going to XY of an event or creating this event. Would it help you? Particularly, you want sales completely tied to you in everything that you do, because if it's not helping them, whether it's brand presence or lead generation, then you really should doubt if you should do it or not, quite honestly. And it goes the same for nonprofits. Like if it's not building your membership and your brand of your organization, you need to rethink about that. So I think it's given me the focus on asking all the right questions first before just jumping in and assuming, oh yeah, of course we have to be there. Of course we have to do that event. You really need to analyze it first.
And are you looking, I'm going to assume the answer is both, but I'm going to ask anyway, is you're measuring a single event, but then you're also looking at the whole portfolio on how it performs? Because if you're measuring just a single one and it's not the biggest lead driver, I could imagine the internal narrative is like, well, then just why are we doing it if it's not? But if you look at the whole portfolio, it's still an important piece to the puzzle. So where do you measure and how do you look at it from singular to all across the ecosystem?
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. If one event doesn't perform, everyone's like, why are we doing it? And you do need to say, let's go back to what our goals were for it. Did it reach those goals? If it didn't reach those goals, then yes, definitely analyze it, decide whether you should do it again or not. I think that every year you need to continue to review how you're approaching your event strategy, because clearly situations change, the economy changes, the geographies change, that sort of thing. But yeah, you have to look at as a whole and say, do we have the right mix? Do we have the right number? I often see people doing way more events than they need to. They could do, there was a company at SEMA that said they did like 400 events and they were trying to figure out how to staff it. I'm like, do you actually need to do 400 events? Is staffing your problem, or is it that you're at too many events or doing too many events? And so I think there's a coworker of mine that she has the best saying, and she said, make less matter more. So I think with your event strategy, it's the same. It's like, let's really focus on those that are moving the needle, that are giving us a return, and put our resources there instead of trying to just do as much as possible.
Yeah, I love that advice.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to steal that.
Words now. Make less, not more.
Yes, I'm definitely stealing that.
Yeah.
So as you were thinking about focusing your career less on events and broadening it across marketing and the impact, you're still involved in that. What are some skills that you think planners now should focus on beefing up if they want to make similar moves? Whether that's staying fully in events and moving from maybe a manager or director to a global VP, looking at all programs instead of in one vertical, or wanting to make the move from association to corporate. It's similar skills, but you have to use different vernacular from what I found. I've made a similar jump, and I think some people struggle with that. So what are some skills that planners now could take on and beef up to be able to move up the ladder or move into corporate or association?
Right. Yeah. I think it actually goes back to curiosity. It goes back to a person who is either a planner or leading a team, being curious about what are we trying to achieve as a company or as an association. What is it that what's the role that events can play in us achieving that? So I think it's talking to peers, talking outside of the events team to really understand the other work that's going on. I think it's also keeping up with, marketing trends, the direction of marketing. There is just so much changing right now with when you think about how AI is playing into how people buy, how people engage, how people learn. They're doing a lot of their own discovery through, various LLM channels that before they ever decide to go to an event or decide to go to engage with a company or a brand, they're already doing the research. So I think if someone wants to move up or continue to be successful in an event role, they need to understand what's happening around them. Obviously keep honing event skills, keep thinking about what's the experience, because again, if people get on a plane to go somewhere, you want to make sure it's the best experience and that your brand comes to life for them and that they feel like that was worth my time. But pay attention to things around you and how you're connected into all the other parts of the organization.
I think that's great advice. And yeah, I read a stat recently. I think it was something like 80% of people want control of the buying process before they ever talk to a person. So
Yes. I believe it. It's a huge number, right? So think about that, I just read an article yesterday where they said, websites at some point might not even ever be visited until the very end, until they've made their decision, because what they're doing is they're going in, with these prompts and these questions to really understand, if they're trying to find a solution to something, they're not saying, give me the top 5 companies that do this. They're saying, I am trying to solve this. How do I solve it? And so that's where they're gathering their information. And so you have to be prepared for that.
And how is that? I mean, certainly it's changed the way that I market and the way I position web pages and even event pages about how we communicate value and why you should come. How does that then impact the experience and what kind of tweaks are you making to give people that? Because you said in the podcast, like, don't talk at people. Like, if they're going to get on a plane and leave their families and come to your event, your show, whatever it is, they don't want to be talked at. This could be a YouTube episode that they could watch, or they could Google it. I've always said, like, people come to events to find the stuff they can't Google. So how does that impact the experience you guys are playing into now that people aren't even touching your site? They might not touch your brand until it's time to decide if they should come.
Right. Yeah. I think it's, it's that personalized experience, which is hard to do at scale, but it's getting to understand that, there's certain types of personas that are showing up at your events. And so creating this curated offering for them that when they get there, it's, the right content sessions are served up to them, that, they're given recommendations of like, here's the, the sponsors of the partners that we probably want to go visit, or here's a network of people that you could connect with. And so it's offering up the personalization as, again, at scale, but being, not thinking of them as a stranger, because they've already done so much research to show up there. So they don't feel like they should be a stranger. And so show them that you know who they are the minute that they start to engage with you.
I think that's great advice. And also thinking people understand the value of events and the data that it generates and the leverage that it could have. But I think sometimes sales and marketing people don't see how much can be leveraged from events. So what do you think sales and marketing miss that event people get that they probably should understand a little bit more about?
The challenge I think that we have with events is that there's attribution models that don't always give events the full credit for driving to a sale, because sometimes it's a very long distance from I attended this event and now I'm deciding to buy whatever you're selling, and so that direct correlation isn't always there. And so you think, well, it didn't really pay off. So I think what I would love them to understand is that it is the deepest engagement that you can get is that in person. When someone does decide to take time out of their day to show up in person, to have, a conversation like we're having, it drives a deeper interest, loyalty, connection that will continue to pay off as long as you have the right methods to follow up with them and continue to engage with them and show that, that you learned something from them when they showed up too. And so I think some people just look at it as a point in time, whereas events really are kind of an accelerator to the funnel, to the sales process, to the relationship being built. And I think that acceleration is something important and not just a 3-day point in time.
And I think that's great advice and agreed on all of it. How do you communicate that to your teams? Like, demand is a collaboration in your organization. It doesn't sit on your team. And right. Sales obviously is separate org as well. So how do you, as someone who sees all of that and has come from events, like how do you communicate that to your marketing team and your sales peers that here's what you can get out of it. Here's all of the content that's going to be produced from this event. And here's what we should do with it. Like, how do you connect those dots for people who haven't sat in basically all 3 seats like you have?
Right. It is hard, and it is an ongoing conversation. And, I'm fortunate that I have a really great partner who leads demand gen, who comes from a background where he sees that events is a driver in the overall demand generation process. But when you don't have it, it is a hard conversation that you have to keep having over and over. Data is what says everything. So it's about how can you find systems, working, with, whoever's running the marketing tech stack, how can you find systems in place that will capture that, and follow a person or follow an organization and say, okay, they went to, these 5 events that we were at or that we put on, and then what other actions do they take? It's really hard. And it's sometimes you don't have that multi-touch, attribution model that you can do that, but you can kind of show examples, like bring out stories of, Microsoft went to these 5 events of ours, and now they're talking, about expanding the software buy with us. So you have to have these stories in lieu of, if you don't have the systems in place, you have to have examples of success to show how it helped and how it worked. And sometimes, one deal, depending on the size of the deal, can say, what, we got our return on being at this event, and it was totally worth it. But it's a mix of data, and it's a mix of, building trust with your peers that are across marketing.
Yeah, I agree. We've also talked about that we're finally seeing events become an integral part of marketing. Like, they're less siloed than they've ever been before. Do you think that we're actually still there, that people see events as these growth drivers and marketing content engines, or is there still some education to be had in unsilo marketing and events?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the company. I've been places where it was, a core of the marketing tactics that were counted on. And I've been places where it's a side thing that's like nice to have. So it's still not consistently thought of as one of those marketing engines that consistently drives the business. I think it's way better than it used to be. But yeah, it's going to continue to be an education that we have to build on. But what I realized is there's other, disciplines within marketing too. People are like, I don't know if that really helps. Like, does, thought leadership content matter? Well, yes, thought leadership content matters. And so that is also an area. So we're not alone in this. But I think there's always room to get better at it.
Yeah, I think in the event world, channel and partnerships is just starting to become a thing, where we've seen, especially in the SaaS and software space, like the channel is sometimes the biggest business driver. And why we don't call it the channel in hospitality and events is beyond me. I don't know why we don't call it that, but like partnerships is just becoming a thing. And I think other people would be like, you're crazy. Why haven't we done this before? So I think that's a great analogy.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. I don't know why we don't call it that. We should.
We absolutely should. As
Yeah.
someone who works deep in partnerships in the events world, why we call it, but I think that's native to most industries, like especially the events world. We love to make up new terms and terminology, and like we recreate the alphabet soup all the time. And
Yes.
so what we'll call it partnerships. We'll call it whatever you want as long as the events world picks it up.
You and I can start a movement. Let's call it channel.
We'll call it the channel. We'll call it. All right. So shifting gears just a little bit. One of the things that I love about you that I've definitely taken away following your career is the introverted leadership. And I think there's so many books. Susan Cain wrote one about like quiet leaders. That is an amazing book. It's a great. How did you find your voice? Especially coming from Microsoft, that is very male dominated, especially software is that. You can get lost in the big voices and big personalities that come with that. Where did you start finding your voice as an introverted servant leader?
I think it happened. It happened over time. I'll talk about one pivotal point, but over time, given more responsibility, being put into the spotlight of having to present to senior leaders, as you grow in your career, those opportunities become more frequent, and you kind of just have to do that. And you find like ways to kind of get yourself hyped up. I had one mentor at one point. She said, senior leaders put on their pants just like you put on your pants. So just don't think about it twice. And I've never forgotten that. It's such a funny comment to me. I also, when I was chair of PCMA, I went and talked at every single chapter meeting. That was the most that I had to be out on a big stage. And that definitely gave me some growth and maturity in my ability to use my voice. But for a long time, I thought I need to act like an extrovert to be a leader. And when I finally learned, it got a lot of clarity on it. I was given a mentor that was fantastic. When I was in the partner channel, my boss was great. I loved her. She's very outgoing, and so she understood that I was an introvert, but she's like, I'm not. And so she was on another panel speaking at something, and there was a woman on there who was a general manager at Microsoft. She had been at IBM, so very successful, but talked about being an introvert and how to be a leader as an introvert. And so Gabriella, my manager, came back. She's like, I got you a mentor. And she was so excited about it. And she's like, she's an introvert. She's been super successful. I told her she needs to be your mentor. And so she became my mentor. And I loved that Gabriella's like, I am not the person to tell you how to act as an introvert, but here's someone that is. And she really was fantastic, not only as a role model to me, but as someone who could give me very specific advice, because she knew exactly what it felt like. And if you're not an introvert, you don't know exactly how it feels to sit in a room and feel like maybe what I say doesn't matter as much. And maybe, I'll just wait to speak. And she gave me something so simple. She said, in every meeting you're in, there's a reason you're there. So speak up and use your voice at some point. It only has to be once. Like, it only has to be that you're going to ask a question or that you're going to add some information that you already had. She's like, don't leave the room and say, oh, I wish I had said that. She's like, say it and just keep practicing that. And she's been fantastic. She's now a leadership coach, and her whole focus is around how to be an introverted leader. And what I realized is that people need leaders that are, different across their career. And so I offer up that ability to kind of show how you can have an impact without being the loudest voice in the room, and that conversations and relationships should be meaningful, and not always just very, very public. And so it came with time, but I'm really grateful that my extroverted manager introduced me to an introverted leader to be a mentor.
You've had some incredible bosses over the years. Very grateful for that. And I'm curious, with how much you've pushed yourself outside of your comfort zone across your career, being an introvert, how did some of that play in with imposter syndrome? Not all of us are Martha Stewart, who was like, what's that? Like, we could aspire to be that one day. I certainly fight this all the time. Like, every time I push myself a little further. I'm like, am I qualified to be here? And I have
Mhm.
a friend who very much reminds me on the regular, like, you didn't get here by accident. And that helps me fight the imposter syndrome. But especially being introverted, I think that leans a lot more into imposter syndrome. So I'm curious how that shows up for you.
It does, yeah. And I think it shows up for everyone, quite honestly. And you have to remind yourself of that everyone is a little bit unsure given the situation, given the environment that they're in. Um, and so I think you made the point exactly, is that you did not get here by accident. There, you've done a lot of work to get invited into that realm, to be given that role and given that job. And so, step up. And I think it's okay to say, I don't know. And I think that's a big thing too, is that, go in with confidence, trust your experience, use your best judgment. But there are going to be times too where you say, I don't know how to do this. And I think that then shows some vulnerability that people want to help you learn. That if your imposter syndrome is grounded in actual truth, then you get to learn and you get to do more. Most of the time that imposter syndrome is not grounded in truth, because you were there for a reason. And so and everyone's going to handle a situation, make decisions differently. So be confident in that, and know that mistakes will happen, but that's all right. It's not the end of the world.
Well, that's how you grow and learn, you know. Not everything's going to turn out perfectly, and that's honestly what I think sometimes make us stronger leaders.
It does, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Last couple questions here. So,
Women have a hard
what's
time with that too. I think men are like, sure, I could do that.
yeah.
Whereas
Well,
women are like, I don't know.
yeah, remember reading a study sometime of men and women reading job descriptions, and if a man fit like even 50% of the qualifications, they're like, yeah, I'm qualified for this and will apply. But a woman has to match like 90 or 95% of the qualifications before they'll even consider submitting a
Yeah, yeah,
resume.
yeah. I think it's real, honestly. Yeah, I read that same study and I think it's real for sure.
I
Yeah.
would agree. What skills do you think matter more as you grow in your leadership and go into director and VP levels that no one formally teaches you?
hmm Um, I think the skill of leading organizations, leading teams, when you don't always have the answers. Because going back to the imposter syndrome, you would look at leaders ahead of you and say, oh, they know what they're doing. They've got that experience. But in reality, there are a lot of new things that they're facing every single day. So I think it's the ability to trust your experience, to ask for input, to show up with confidence, to get your teams to feel confident when they look at you. It's kind of when I'm on a flight and it's bumpy, I look at the flight attendants. I'm like, do they look worried? They don't look worried, so I'm not worried. I think it's the same as that. As a leader, they don't teach you that so many eyes can be on you, looking for reassurance about the direction you're going, the decisions that are being made. So it's showing up for others more than just for yourself. And I think that that's probably the biggest shift as you become more senior.
And I think I've noticed in talking with you today, that's definitely a trend in the strong leaders and mentors that you've had is really that servant leadership is they were giving like your boss could have easily been like, I don't know any introverted leaders, like you're on your own, go find someone instead of being like, I found the perfect mentor for you. Like it sounds like so many of your bosses were that servant leader and it served you well.
They were, yeah. And I think, yeah, you get to a certain, I've talked to friends of mine, you get to a certain point in your career too, is that it's more important to help those on your team and those around you and lift them up. And that, when your teams are successful and the people around you are successful, like you feel that even more sometimes. Like you're a proud, I'm a parent. So I'm like a proud parent to all the people that are on my team. And, I want everyone to be successful. And that matters more to me, that they're the ones getting the limelight. They're the ones that are getting, the attention for something great happening. And it really is, there's a point in your career, like, that matters more to me than my any sort of kudos that I would get.
I think that's great. And I tell teams all the time that work for me, like at some point I want you to grow so much that you grow out of this team.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
that's ultimately my goal is that you get so good and complacent basically that you're like, all right, it's time for a new challenge. I've got to
Yeah.
go.
You can see confident managers when they are excited for people on their team to move on to a bigger or different role, that you're really excited for them, because you know that you'll find, someone, it's not the same person, but you'll find someone else to, cover the work, but you have helped them grow. And that's what you want. You want them to go on and do bigger things. I mean, there's some people that have been on my teams through the years that they're doing amazing things, amazing. And I'm like, I'm so excited for them. It's so cool to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up here, and we like to end every episode with something I call the closed door truth. It's the conversation that happens after the meeting when the deck is closed and the real issue is still sitting there. So I'm curious, Katie, when all the strategies, titles, wins are stripped away, what do you hope people say was different about how they felt working with you? Like when someone works on your team or does an event with you, or even partners, colleagues, when they walk away, what do you want them to say about working with Katie?
That's a great question. I think that I built a strong relationship with them, that I treated them with respect, and that my contributions made the event or the work better. Those are the biggest things.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to wrap up our conversation. And one thing this conversation makes very clear is that events don't matter because of how big they are or how perfectly they're executed. They matter because of what they make possible afterward. So, Katie, thank you for reminding us that most powerful careers aren't built by climbing faster. They're built by growing wider, building trust, and creating rooms where people can actually do their best work. So thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for tuning in to another Event About It after show, because we know the best conversations start after the show ends. And until then, stay curious.